Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Um, Thank you so much to everyone who's tuning in on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. We welcome your questions and comments throughout the conversation. My name is Will Petrick, and I'm the budget researcher with Policy Matters Ohio. Policy Matters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute, and we're working to create a more vibrant, equitable, sustainable, and inclusive Ohio. And we are here today because all of us, no matter what we look like or where we live, deserve basic human dignity. We all deserve to thrive and to pursue our dreams. COVID-19 upended life throughout the country. Many people had to put their dreams on hold, and in response, the federal government passed legislation to provide immediate relief for kids, adults, and families. And one way it did that is by temporarily expanding tax credits. This will put more money into people's pockets to be able to build towards a brighter future and help pay for the basics, things like groceries, rent, childcare. And we wanted to have this conversation today to highlight the immediate opportunity to get those tax credits and get that money. And while the deadline to file taxes is traditionally April 15th, this year the deadline is April 18th. That's 1 week from today. We also wanted to highlight just the impact that tax credits can have on the lives of kids, adults, and families. And that's where I wanted to start this conversation today. I talked about the federal legislation. So the American Rescue Plan was passed at the beginning of last year, and that expanded the child tax credit for 1 year, tax year 2021. And as a result of that, over 1.2 million Ohio families received a monthly child tax credit payment between July and December of last year. Parents got $300 a month for every child 5 years or younger, and received $250 a month for kids ages 6 to 17. So, first wanted to introduce Jason Carter. He's a father and an advocate, and he lives in Cincinnati. Jason, do you mind just introducing yourself and sharing more about how the monthly child tax credit payment helped your family and what that additional support meant for you and your family?
Yes, my name is Jason Carter. My wife, Kaya, and I have a beautiful 20-month-old named Lola. And what that child tax credit did for us was provide us a few $100s a month that we use to go towards child care, which was one of the biggest blessings that we could receive. We talked extensively about our plans for the future, and one of our immediate plans was to become homeowners. We want a place for our little girl to grow up in. We want a nice yard for her to be able to play in, and all those good things that are a part of, the good parts of life. So what that child tax credit did was take that chunk of money and give us room to be able to save a little bit every month that would go towards down payment, um, or any immediate things that we needed. That $300 could also be used for groceries for the daily things that we needed to take care of our little girl. Um, and so that was a big blessing for us as far as moving towards what we consider our American dream. We worked really hard, and that was one way that we were able to start to realize those goals that we have. So once we didn't weren't able to receive the credit anymore, that dream that we had before, um, it made it harder for us to be able to keep hope that we would be able to achieve that. So we've had to pivot in the meantime. One of the misconceptions that I've heard as far as people who haven't supported the child tax credit um, is not trusting where the money goes. But I always encourage people to look at the picture more full scope, um, and how it can support families. So, as I mentioned before, that's money that can not only go towards childcare, but it also go towards groceries. My wife and I both work jobs, and we both have vehicles. Vehicles require maintenance. We're talking about oil changes. When weather changes, you're talking about new tires for each car. Um, those also talking about just regular bills, energy bill, uh, just the basic things that are functions of our life and help us maintain, the basics of what we need every day. Those are all things that we need to also take care of our child. All of those things are connected. When you put money towards the energy bill, that's on these cold nights that come, being able to turn on the heat and make sure our little girl is warm. Um, as far as getting her to daycare, that's money for gas. Be able to help us get her there, and then also help us still be able to get to the jobs that we have to maintain. Oil changes as well. Um, you know, without vehicles being able to operate, there's nothing we can do. So those are just a few examples of being able to look at the full scope of the positive effects that the child tax credit has had, and that in particular for us was just a way for us to alleviate some of the stress that we had. Last year, I lost a job that paid really well, so we took a huge financial hit. The job that I'm at now, it takes two and a half paychecks to equal one paycheck that I used to make. So you can only imagine how big of a hit we've taken as far as being able to maintain, keep up with bills and everything else. And so now we're in a position where we're thinking about other options, um, things to get our daughter involved in as she approaches two. She's very active, uh, very curious about a lot of things. We want to get her involved in activities. Everything costs money. So we don't want to hinder her growth in any area. So even something as simple as being able to provide her swimming lessons is more than just, oh, we want her to just know how to swim. Is her also enhancing those social skills and just developing, potentially a skill that, who knows, and one day it might be able to save her life kind of thing. But it's just these basic development things that we want to be able to provide for her and not have to worry about so much, hey, what does this cost? What does that cost? And to limit the potential growth that she still has ahead of her. So that is why I encourage people to look at full scope of things of why this child tax credit is so very important and how it helps families.
Thank you so much, Jason,
No problem.
just for sharing more about what those monthly child tax credit payments have meant to you and your family, um, both in terms of just maintaining a decent quality of life, but also, yeah, relieving stress on the day to day. So thank you so much, Jason. I want to turn it over now to Tammy Lunan, who's the Caring Economy Organizing Director with the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. She's committed to building political power in underserved communities. Tammy, I know you work with families in your community organizing work. Do you mind just introducing yourself and also just share what you've been hearing from families about just the impact of tax credits?
Yes, thank you, Will. Um, as Will said, I'm Tammy Lunan with the OOC, and I've been leading our child care and safety network. Um, as we navigate these unprecedented times, rent, food, childcare, gas, it's never been more expensive to raise a family and to just get by. Um, expanding the tax credits, which was a part of Biden's COVID relief package, is something that the OOC and our partners have been fighting for. And now we're pushing for it to be more inclusive and permanent. Over half of the country finds itself on the edge of economic ruin, even as they work hard to make ends meet. Um, The story is the same for Ohio families. I've personally talked to many parents that were devastated by losing their monthly child tax credit payments. It has looked like some parents having to bring their children to work because they can no longer afford to pay their copays. Some families are making hard decisions about how they spend the funds that are accessible to them. Other families are contemplating, dropping out of the workforce altogether. And we see that more often when we think about the families that are impacted by the cliff effect. We also know that this disproportionately impacts women and women of color. Families are in an unprecedented crisis. They're no better off than they were before the pandemic. um, the expansion of the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit would ensure that tens of millions of families currently living at or near poverty level or poverty lines will have access to the resources they need to provide for their families. These expansions should also provide all families and all low income individuals, regardless of their formal work status, cash payments significant enough to put those who need it most on a path to economic security and self determination. This includes unpaid caregivers who do valuable work of caring for their loved ones, as well as documented and undocumented immigrants.
Thanks, Tammy. So, um, really appreciate you just sharing what you've been hearing. And next, I want to turn the floor to Catherine Unger. She's the policy associate with the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio. We've been doing a lot of work together around these tax credits and getting the word out to families. And she's just really committed to improving the lives of kids and families. And she's also a new mom. So Catherine, you had a baby during the pandemic. You've also mentioned your friend who had twins last year. Can you just introduce yourself and share what the child tax credit has meant to you and your family and what it's meant for your friend?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Will, and thanks for everyone for being here. I agree with Jason. Every point he said, this is more than sort of the money. This is about family well-being, family stability, family dignity. And I think that's what's so special about the child tax credits is that it's not tied to a specific need. It's for the family to decide what their needs are. So for us, that was childcare, and that money went directly to childcare. For my friend who was not anticipating having twins and then now is seeing how expensive that is, that was going towards diapers and formula for one of the babies. So you could see, I think it's just for each individual family, their decision on how to support their family. But thank you all for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So next, just wanted to introduce Alicia Griesby, who's with the Metro West Community Development Organization, and they're VITA site coordinator. So VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. So Alicia, you've helped families complete their taxes and help families to get these tax credits. Can you just introduce yourself and share maybe a memory or story of how a parent or caregiver has reacted to just being able to get their tax refund?
Hi, I'm Alicia, as stated. Thank you, Will, for introducing me. I actually, if it's okay, would like to go with my own story, just for the sake of client privacy. I know that a few years back I was a server, and serving wages not great. I also have 3 kids, so just like everybody else, I thought I had to go to H&R Block and file my taxes. And the way they do it, they tell you what you're getting back, and then they take the amount out of your refund, so you don't really think about how much money it is. But I wound up paying something like $800 per year when I really needed that money as a server. And finding out when this became part of my job, that I could have just not been doing that, all these years. It's very important to me to make sure that other people, other working families know that they don't have to do that. They can come here and get their taxes done for free by people who are certified by the IRS. And you don't have to worry about, that extra $800 that you earned disappearing.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for the service that you do and for sharing your own personal story. We're going to talk more about the critical work of VitaSites later in the conversation. But yeah, mostly, now that we've heard from all of us about just why these tax credits are so critical for families, I want to talk just briefly about some of the research. So, I mentioned at the top, over 1.2 million families in Ohio received those monthly child tax credit payments between July and December of last year. And, those families received an average of $442 each month. And, basically this was kind of a policy experiment, and it had an immediate impact. We've heard it anecdotally from everyone on this call. But, ultimately, part of it was that money gave parents a little bit more breathing room, reduced stress, but also, like has been discussed, it helped people afford the things that they need. So, families were able to pay for groceries, for rent, clothing, pay the heating bill, phone, internet, different educational expenses. Our research showed that, immediately it had an impact on hunger. More families were able to get enough to eat, and fewer households reported having trouble paying for those monthly basics. So, it had an immediate impact. And we also saw nationally the monthly childhood poverty decreased by nearly 30%. And, ultimately, again, those tax credits, those monthly payments were going out to families between July and December. Unfortunately, they stopped at the beginning of this year. And we also saw an immediate increase in childhood poverty this year. There was one study that basically showed 3.7 million more kids are now in poverty. And so, again, this really shows the impact of tax credits and what they mean for economic security and stability for kids and families. And so, while those monthly payments ended at the end of last year, the good news is families are likely eligible for more money. That was half of the child tax credit. So there's another half that they're eligible for this year when they file their taxes. In addition to the child tax credit, more money than ever before is available as a result, again, of federal legislation through the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, as well as the stimulus check from last year. So there's more money, the amount is greater, but also more people than ever before are eligible. So in previous years, families with low wages were excluded from the child tax credit and from the child and dependent care tax credit because those tax credits were non-refundable. And that means that families could only access tax credits if they owed taxes. So for families who didn't owe federal income taxes or who got a refund, basically they were left out of those two major tax credits. This year, those families are included. Again, those are a lot of families with low wages, Black and brown families. And so again, this year, for one time only, nearly all families with low wages will be eligible for that child tax credit. So, in this conversation, we don't plan to get into all the technical details of tax credits, but we do want to provide, some high-level information about, basically like what this could mean for families with different circumstances. So, Catherine, You're an expert on the child tax credit, and you've also been doing a lot of work around the stimulus checks. Can you provide an example of how much the refund could be from the child tax credit and stimulus checks for a couple of different families with different circumstances?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start with the example of a personal friend who I know who has twins and had twins in December. And I think this is really an important distinction because the federal government never allowed a family who had a baby in 2021 to update their dependents. And so everyone who had a baby in 2021 is likely eligible for this child tax, the full child tax credit payment. So they didn't receive the first half. And when I say everyone, it's about 90%, I should say. There are income limitations. So about 90% of those babies born in 2021 should be eligible for that full amount of $3,600 per child. So in the case of a family who welcomes twins in December of 2021, each of those babies, their family is entitled to $3,600 for each of those babies for the child tax credit, and then an additional $1,400 for each of those babies for the recovery rebate. So that's a total of $10,000 in child tax credit that's going to this one single family in tax credits, just looking at the child tax credit and the recovery rebate. And then in another example, we could look at a family who has a new child in April of 2021. Again, I really want to emphasize that those babies born in 2021, those families haven't received a dime of their child tax credit yet. But then this family also has a 4-year-old. And so this family is a situation where they received half of their child tax credit for their 4-year-old, but they haven't received anything for their new baby in 2021. So they would be looking at $3,600, the full amount for that new baby born in April of 2021, and then $1,800 for their 4-year-old because they already received the first half in 2021. And then a $1,400 for the recovery rebate for that newborn baby. So that's a total of $5,400. And in the case of just a family who has one child who's already received the first half of their child tax credit, they could be looking at $1,800 to $1,500. So that's significant in and of itself, just looking at one family. And we've worked with many families who have many children, and it can be really significant, for their family budgets. So thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So just to reiterate, I'm hearing a new family with twins, $10,000 potentially in a one-time tax credit from the child tax credit and those stimulus checks. Yeah, that's a game changer. And it sounds like even for other families, over $1,000 back. So that can make a real difference and help pay for a car repair or some other large one-time expense. So Tammy, I wanted to ask you a similar question, but in terms of the earned income tax credit and the child independent care tax credit. Can you provide, kind of similar to what Catherine did, just an example of maybe a couple families and how much they might get back from those tax credits?
Definitely. So for one scenario, we have Mary and John. They have 2 children, ages 4 and 7, and together they make about $40,000 annually. They spent $4,000 for summer camp for their 7-year-old and $5,000 for childcare for their 4-year-old in 2021. Mary and John's family would be eligible for $2,915 from the federal refundable EITC. Mary and John's family would also be eligible for $4,500 from the federal CDCTC. About 50% of the $4,000 and 50% of the $5,000. Another scenario is Amy is a single mom with a 3-year-old. She makes about $15 an hour. It's about $31,200 a year. Amy spent $7,000 on childcare for her 3-year-old in 2021. Amy would be eligible for 1,747 from the federal refundable EITC, and Amy would be eligible for 3,500 from the federal CDCTC. That's about 50% of the 7,000 allotment.
Thanks, Tammy. Again, kind of my takeaway from that, whether you're a single mom making $15 an hour or a family of two making 40,000, there's significant one-time return to help pay the rent or help with other one-time costs. So, you know, if you are tuning in and you're not sure whether you're eligible for all these different tax credits, Catherine and I actually released a blog a couple weeks ago that has different online eligibility calculators. So we'll share some of the links to those. You can basically learn more to see if you and your unique family situation, if you're eligible, and also how much money you might be eligible for. So there's a child tax credit calculator, there's a child independent care tax credit calculator, and an earned income tax credit calculator that we can share. But next I wanted to, the other way that you can find out you're eligible is with resources and support from VITA sites. So Alicia, again, VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. Can you just talk a little more about the goals of VITA sites and the role of those sites in helping people get tax credits and the money that they deserve?
So if I remember correctly, the ITC VITA sites were specifically made because corporations such as H&R Block and whatever other tax filing is out there, we're claiming a large chunk of the credits meant to help families instead of the money going into the hands of the families who needed it. So that's why we do what we do. I want to say that the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, being expanded, the age limit has been expanded. It used to be, I think, between 19 and 64 or 65. So a lot of seniors also are now eligible to get an earned income credit where they weren't before. But especially families who were like on disability and didn't usually file, so they didn't receive their stimulus checks, they're eligible to come in and claim their stimulus through the recovery rebate credit that Catherine was speaking about earlier. So that's a really good thing that if anybody didn't get their stimulus, their $1,400 in March of 2021, sites like this are instrumental in claiming that for them. Did I hit everything? Am I missing anything?
You did, yeah, that was great,
Okay.
Alicia. I think another thing, just because a lot of people in the public may have not heard of VITA sites, just wanted to ask you, how can people find the nearest VITA site? And also, I know that different VITA sites, some are led by volunteers and organized by volunteers. So also, do you have any tips for people who do need help filing taxes? There's a week left. Some of these VITA sites already have, are kind of under capacity. So can you share, I guess, resources and information about, one, how people can find a VITA site close to them, but then two, how to navigate, like how to decide which VITA site is best for them?
I know in Cuyahoga County, you can call 211. That is the way a lot of people have been doing it for years. And they will actually give you an option between locations, ones that are close to you, or just first available appointments. I know also in Cuyahoga County, refundohio.org is a place you can go online. You can look at the different locations. I am not real sure about outside because I did not become aware of this program until I started being a site coordinator. But it's usually run by the United Way, so I'm pretty sure if you Google United Way invite a site wherever you are, that you'll be able to come up with something close.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So one other link I wanted to just share with the audience. There's a resource called getyourrefund.org. And at the getyourrefund.org site, there's another link where you can basically click and look up a VITA provider. And at that site, you can just basically type in your zip code and several different VITA sites will pop up. I guess one other question for you, Alicia, in terms of capacity, if there are, we've got kind of a week left and some VITA sites are already at capacity, do you have any recommendations for folks kind of trying to navigate if one site is totally, at capacity and not able to help? What do you advise?
That's a really good question. Like I said, 211. I just called earlier to make sure that it would not send, because my site at Lynn Omni is already booked for the rest of the year. I just called earlier to ensure that it was funneling people toward the correct locations. So that one's good. It's a little difficult to get a hold of the VITA site coordinators because, as you stated, they're volunteers. They come from all over, and so you can always call the sites that they're at to ask, but you might not get a site coordinator since they only use the sites for they don't necessarily work there as their day job like I do. So I would definitely try Googling that if you're able to, or you can just call at, like, for instance, I know they have them at libraries a lot. You can call the libraries, and the librarians are usually very knowledgeable about when the sites are, they'll be able to direct you to the site coordinator is, and they'll be able to let you kind of know what the traffic has looked like. And then, of course, the IRS has a free file tool. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to say, don't be afraid of the April 18th deadline. There is usually a VITA site that will go extend into the summer. We don't hear, but I know there has been one. And also, usually the April 18th deadline is you only really have to be worried about that deadline if you owe money. If you are owed money by the government, you can file after. So don't let that, stop you in case you see this late and you're like, oh, well, I've missed the deadline. If you are eligible to claim credits from the government, you can definitely file after.
Thank you, Alicia. And thank you so much for the work that you do. And yeah, just next, Alicia shared some of this info, but also wanted to ask Catherine, we've got a week till April 18th, but like Alicia said, there are opportunities after that. Can you share a little bit more about, what can people do now to get the tax credits and get the money that they deserve?
Definitely. Check out your VITA site, like Alicia said. And also I think don't be afraid of that April 18th deadline. You can also go to getyourrefund.org and file your taxes on your own. They actually provide some resources on their website and a chat feature for help on filing taxes. They also do provide virtual assistance, but unfortunately for meeting that deadline, and if you do owe taxes, that deadline has sort of passed. But it will still be available. So I would just definitely recommend going to getyourrefund.org and checking out their resources, because they can direct you to a VITA site. They can help you file by yourself. And then eventually what will become available in May, and I think this is really important, is something called simplified filing. And Get Your Refund will eventually have a link to simplified filing, which will be getctc.org. This is a simplified filing portal that is available to people who make under $12,500, $550 individually, or $25,100 filed jointly. And it really takes about 15 minutes. You need your social security number or your ITIN number, and then your kid's social security number and date of birth. And it's just it's an easier way to file taxes. Of course, by doing it that way, you aren't necessarily going to get the EITC, but you would be available to get the CTC and the recovery rebate. So that's going to be available in May, and I think is going to run likely until October 18th. So yeah, I think that's what I'd recommend. And word of mouth, tell people that filing taxes this year is more important than ever because of all of these expanded tax credits.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I just basically wanted to reiterate that it's up to all of us to try to get the word out to the families and adults so that people can get these resources. And, ultimately, again, we've talked about this is more than a check. This is more than money. This is security. This is stability. This is future dreams. And, ultimately, again, these are resources that we deserve and that people are eligible for. And so, really want to invite everyone who's joining us today, one, to make sure you file your taxes before April 18th. Like Alicia and Catherine mentioned, there are opportunities after that as well. But also, we need your help to get the word out to people in the community. So, please share this live stream if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. And there's other information you can share too. Catherine and I have a blog post that basically outlines a lot of the information that we shared today, and also that getyourrefund.org link to help people file. So I think with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for being with us, for joining us. Big thanks to Jason Carter, Tammy Lunin, Catherine Unger, Alicia Griesby, and thank you so much to Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, and the Midwest Community Development Organization. Really, really appreciate you all for being here. Thank you so much for joining us, and to everyone for tuning in today. And hope you all have a great rest of your week. Take care.